Scott, you're the author of Scare Your Soul, which is also a movement by the same name. So I'm curious, what does it mean to you with this to scare your soul, and how did this become the focus of your life's work?
Oh my gosh. So Scare Your Soul is a name that I think sticks in people's brains. When they hear it, they wonder, what is this guy talking about? And then very quickly it becomes, aha, I get it. I want to do that. And then I want to tell somebody else that I scared my soul this morning. So technically, what I am referring to when I say scare your soul is that you're stepping into a small moment of courage, that you're doing something that requires some bravery, maybe some healthy anxiety, and it's for a worthy goal. That it's not just, doing something just for adrenaline's sake, but that legitimately you need to push through something in life.
Mm.
And it came to me literally where most great ideas come from, and that was in the shower. Uh, I had sung in front of a very busy restaurant to overcome a fear of singing, and posted about my experience on Facebook, and was deluged with hundreds of messages. How did you do that? Tell me about what you're doing. What is this movement? And there was no movement. It was me singing in front of a restaurant. And so that night, I came up with the name and very quickly did a $14 website that stayed up for many years. And it has just grown by leaps and bounds ever since.
Okay, I love this. And I think it's interesting that you said to be connected to a worthy goal
Yeah.
because that gives somebody something to anchor to versus like, I'm just going to do it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
But let's unpack the singing thing because I think the reason it probably took off is that I think so many of us have vulnerability. If you think about the voice as like we have unique fingerprints, our voice is also unique to us, right? You can hear Morgan Freeman's voice somewhere and just identify it without even seeing him, right? It's such a beautiful part of who we are. It's how we communicate and it's how we express ourselves. But singing takes it to a whole other level because there's such vulnerability about putting words into like that into music and allowing others to hear that. And it's something that we all, if you anyone knows kids knows, kids love to sing. It's just something we all love to do. And you had some wounding, and I know you're not alone with this, and I did too. So I want you to tell us why you felt the need to scare your soul by singing in front of a restaurant.
Sure. And it's funny because when I talk about this with groups, inevitably I will have a large handful of people that will come up to me afterwards and tell me that almost the exact same thing happened to them, which is really unfortunate. So, my
Yes.
story is when I was 10 years old, so fourth grade, kind of plug yourself back into what it feels like to be in fourth grade. I was the shortest, shyest kid in my grade, chronically shy, and I was bullied on top of it. So, living a very fearful and shy and quiet life, and found myself on the lowest riser of a fourth grade choir concert practice, which I'm sure in many of your listeners' minds is bringing up that moment. For those of us that are on the shorter side, we're always at the front. All the tall kids go to the top risers. And we were given this charge by our substitute choir teacher to sing a solo line in one song, and that song was 76 Trombones.
You'll never forget it, Scott.
That golden oldie.
Yes, and you will never
And
forget that song either, right?
that never. And so the entire grade started, and it came around to me to sing my little phrase, and I locked up.
Mm.
I couldn't get it out, and it was just the worst. Just I remember I could almost feel like every other kid's gaze was going into the back of my head. And instead of just moving on with the song,
Mm.
the choir teacher got a little upset and decided to start over again. And the same thing happened, came around to me, and I couldn't get out a syllable. And I'm sure I was bright red at the time. And he indeed started it again a third time. Came around to me, and at that point, I was a statue. I couldn't move. I couldn't get a word out. Absolutely just traumatized by this moment.
Mm.
And he stomped up to me and said, clearly you can't sing, just mouth the words for the
Hmm.
rest of the year.
It pains me. I read it in your book and it's so painful. Those moments with a teacher or something just saying that one line that they think is harmless that literally stayed with you
It,
for 30 more years until you had that moment to like break
it,
free from that trauma because it's a
it,
little t trauma.
it is a little T trauma, and it was a story that I felt like it was written in ink, like a tattoo on me,
Oh,
that I can't do this, shouldn't do it. I should be shamed or feel shameful if I do it. So, no joke, I would be at concerts in my 30s and early 40s, and everybody is singing out loud. Of course, this is what we do at a concert. And I'd be mouthing the words.
oh, that breaks my heart a little, Scott. I have to say, it makes me so sad for little Scott that you
Yeah.
had that wounding from this teacher and it stayed with you. But I think, and this is probably what we're going to talk about, our mess becomes our message, or our can sometimes trigger our life's work.
Indeed, it did. And many people will say to me now, boy, could you just find those bullies and just, what would you do if you found them? Or what would you do if you found that choir teacher? And I literally say, that is my fuel.
Mm,
That literally led me to my purpose on this earth, which is an interesting frame when we're going through deeply challenging times.
totally.
What fuel does that become, and when are we aligned with that moment? For me, it was 35 years later, and I had done a lot of work in positive psychology and in behavior design. I had started a happiness incubator, and I had done a TEDx talk. So I put in some work, but I knew it was time to sing out loud in a public setting. And so I literally found the busiest restaurant I could find, which was a brunch restaurant on a Sunday morning in May, and I confronted the deepest, darkest terror that I had inside of me.
And did you go with your sister?
I did. So my sister is has a beautiful voice, and she said, "I'll go with you." And I thought, great, like we don't have to do these things alone in life, by the way. Where it's not like we have to be a solo actor. So she came and was very, very helpful. To me, it was one of the most powerful, freeing, amazing experiences that I probably have had in my entire life. And the funny part was, I was not good. Like, there was no sense that I was up there making people's day. It was the fact that I was taking my power back and rewriting that story. And I think very quickly the people that were there knew there was something special going on here. This is not your typical guy serenade, busking on the street corner, because my voice would have been better. But they rallied behind me. And I remember a kid came and threw a dollar bill in my guitar case. I mean, it was funny and touching and powerful. And it was the Facebook post about that experience. No cost, very little planning, but so deeply rooted in purpose
Yes.
that people connected with it and connected with it immediately.
Okay. So I have to know, what did you sing?
Okay, good question. So I grew up, I wanted to kind of tap into something that felt comfortable in the moment. So
Yeah.
I grew up, my parents were huge, like music lovers, and we always had James Taylor playing in the background at my house or the Beatles. But more than anything else, and maybe it's my last name, we had Simon and Garfunkel
Oh.
playing. So The Boxer was the first song that I sang, and continued on singing a couple of Simon and Garfunkel songs. I think I needed just a little comfort in that moment, something that felt like it was kind of part of the fabric of my family. And I really, I look back on that moment, Michelle, every once in a while we have these little windows into our purpose or our alignment, where we need to go in life. Maybe it's somebody meeting their soulmate, or maybe it's somebody making a major decision that leads to a lifelong journey. That was mine. I literally that day turned a corner in my life, and Scare Your Soul was born. And I almost look at it, it was like before that moment and after that moment are two very distinct parts of my life.
And I love that the crowd rallied around you. Do you have a sense, what would you have done, do you think, if, I don't know, it wasn't like that? You wouldn't have mattered, it feels like. This is what I'm feeling from you. But I'm just curious, do you have a sense of that? And maybe, I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's a great question. And it's
Because this
funny.
is what holds people back. You,
Absolutely.
right? So that's kind of why I'm going there.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think my answer is very simple. It would not have mattered in the slightest what the crowd's reaction was. Um, and I bring up the crowd's reaction, I think, for this reason. We as humans, I think more than anything else, because there's so much out there in the world right now dividing us and polarizing us, and oy, um, we root for each other when we do brave things.
Yeah, I love that. I just got
Like,
goosebumps. I love
yes.
that.
So think about the movies that you love or even the songs that you love and think about the people in your life that do brave things. Like what do we want to do? We want to cheer them on. It's like this beautiful human urge that I think we forget about. And when
Totally.
we tap into that, and I think this is, Michelle, what is so powerful about the movement of Scare Your Soul that has absolutely nothing to do with me, but everything to do with the fact that we want to root for each other. And that sometimes to get over that hump, if it's a big one, we don't mind a little extra support along the way.
Yes.
So very quickly, I was creating challenges. People would come to our Facebook page and root on each other. We started to have ambassadors, and they were rooting each other on. And that to me is really part of the secret, I think, of our growth was the fact that you're not in this alone.
Yeah. So let's go back to little Scott, though. What was the limiting belief or the core wound that you internalized because of that moment with that teacher?
So I think to me it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I had already thought my voice and my truth are not valuable.
Mm,
What I have to say doesn't matter. In
mm.
fact, what I have to say might get mocked, it might get silenced. And so I was that kid who would be in honors or AP classes sitting in the back of the room hoping to never get called on.
It gave you a lot of anxiety and yeah,
A ton.
yeah,
And that led to poor relationships, feelings of unworthiness, playing small in life. At 21, I was working the alternative music aisle in a record store after graduating. It took me 5 years to graduate college. I did do it, but with the help of alcohol and a lot of hiding and not showing my true self and not speaking my true voice.
yeah,
And I think that felt, one of the beauties of this job is I get to work with people and help people and talk to people all the time. There's a sense of normalcy that we have sometimes over our wounds and over our patterns.
yeah,
And all of a sudden, even though it's destructive or it's hurtful or it's painful, the normalcy of it, our body says, well, at least it's normal. Let's keep it that way.
yeah. It's safe in
It's
your
safe.
mind. The brain likes certainty. So it's certain even if it sucks.
It, and that to me, if we can just give ourselves a few experiences, even small ones, that break that wide open. And for
Yeah.
me, singing was like a perfect example of that. It
Yes.
was, let's break that wide open. Of course, I didn't think anything of mouthing the words when I was at concerts when I was 42, because that was comfortable and normal to me. But I wasn't living my best, truest, most amazing self and most amazing life. I want that. I want to be singing at the top of my lungs, and I want everybody else to as well.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people, like you said, people came up to you after that that have that particular scarring, that particular experience of feeling like somebody criticized their voice. I actually just heard Angelina Jolie in an interview. She's in a role where she never sang in her life, playing opera and someone close to her, she doesn't say who, told
Yeah.
her she doesn't have a good voice. And she internalized that as an adult. But I think when you're a young, empathetic, shy, loving little boy, and it cut deep for you. And so I wore a back brace for scoliosis, and I had been in middle school. I had been in doing musical theater, and I used to sing solos. And the second I got on the brace, I realized I won't be able to do this anymore because it literally came from below my chin and dug into my thighs, and you can't breathe in it, which means you can't sing and you can't like do the little dance numbers that the theater director would put together. And I remember her telling my mom once, Michelle has good stage presence. And I'm like, oh, right. I can't sing. She gives me the solos because I know how to move on stage in a way that she approves of. And so I just stopped it. And even when I was in high school and could have picked it up, because at some point I didn't have to wear the brace 23 hours of the day anymore. It became like
Oh my.
16. I know it's a little torturous. But I didn't join choir like my best friend who was in it. And I wanted to, but I didn't. And so as an adult, I at some point started taking voice lessons. And I would say to my husband or whatever, I was like, it's like even before I met him, actually, I'd say to my friends, it's like therapy because there's something so nice about being able to just feel okay using your voice and
Yes.
enjoying the music. But I have that scare your soul goal that you did because I've still never sang publicly, and I've written a couple songs, and I worked with a voice coach here, and it was so amazing hearing her sing my lyrics, and I have that desire. So I was actually just interviewed on a podcast, and the woman, somehow we were all talking about what would we, if we were 10 years old, what would, we know we would want to do. And she said, oh, I would want to be singing on stage. And I said, I think I might want to be joining you. And she's like, well, I'm going to karaoke Saturday. Do you want to come? And I was like, inside the voice was like, yes. And I'm like, I'm not ready. But what would you say to me? Because I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one, Scott.
Yeah, I think, we can use all kinds of frameworks to think about this, and we can talk worst case scenario, like what's the worst thing that could possibly
Right.
happen, and which is rarely as bad as we think it. Our bodies and our brains are so sensitized to what could potentially put us in danger.
Yes.
So our bodies and our brains literally perceive singing on stage. You already know you've got great stage presence. You're writing songs. You're almost there. But your body and your brain are literally perceiving it the exact same way they would as if a bear was charging at you on a hike.
Totally.
It's deeply distressing and anxiety producing when that happens. So to me, what I would say is baby steps. It's literally what is the smallest step forward that you can take. And for you, that might mean literally maybe being part of a practice. Let's say someone else is going to be doing it and you just attend the practice. Then maybe the next time you actually get up on stage before everybody gets there and you do a duet. Little by little, this kind of mastery starts to enter our bodies, our confidence, our sense of agency. And we forget that. We many people think like I gotta bite it all off at one, bite. I have to quit that job, or I have to leave this relationship, or I have to, be a Broadway star because that's my future. When really it's that one step forward that leads to the rest of the steps that come after.
Yes. And actually, that same friend who was in high school with me in choir, she went on to sing for the Pitches at Harvard. So that's their a cappella group.
Yeah.
And she is in a band, and they occasionally they do that. She plays with these guys. They do like I don't know, sets of whatever the theme is of that show. And she's the backup singer. So people come up on stage. And I was this close to flying out to New York because I'm in California now. I was like, okay, I'm going to come to that February show, and I'm going to get up and we'll sing together. So it's going to happen. But I appreciate you sharing this story. So the core wound you told us, what happened when you sang? Was there a healing that happened?
Oh, instantaneously.
And what was that shift? Like what did that translate for you, either energetically or with words?
Yeah. So energetically, it was like a weight that had been on my shoulders that was lifted immediately. Sometimes we have weights that we don't even realize are there, like,
Totally.
and they're pressing, and they may not affect our daily existence, right? We still have jobs, or maybe we're raising families, we're in a relationship, and thank God it's working. Um, but we're not living really that full life that we could.
Yes.
So to me, so I'd love to tell you a quick story that I think is
Please.
actually the best
Please.
exemplification of this. And
Yes.
it's really what gave me the confidence that Scare Your Soul wasn't just a website or an idea, it was a movement.
Okay.
So one of our first ambassadors is a woman named Johanna. And Johanna was born in Beverly Hills. Her dad is an agent, her mom is a writer, and she was the life of the party from the get-go. Super funny and agile. She was a great dancer, and she would go to Lakers games with her dad, and the two of them would sit there together, and he would watch the game, loved obviously the Lakers, and she would watch the cheerleaders. She loved watching cheerleaders. It was like entrancing, their skill and their ability and their verve. And she just made up a commitment to herself that she would be a cheerleader once she got to high school.
Yes.
And to hear her tell you the story, what she would say is, my body type was not acceptable to be a cheerleader at the high school that she went to in Beverly Hills at
Mm.
that time.
Yeah.
We're talking in the 80s, early 80s.
Yeah.
And she ended up then switching schools later and never was a cheerleader, never able to be a cheerleader. So when I met Johanna, I just started Scare Your Soul. She was 52, mother of three, divorced. She had just overcome a bout of cancer
Mm.
and was working as a nurse in the inner city, working incredibly long shifts and deeply draining, emotionally draining. And she came to me and she said, Scotty, she's the only person in the world who calls me Scotty. I love it when it comes from her. And she said, I need Scare Your Soul. I need to do something. My life is just so challenging right now. And I
Mm.
said, well, I'm happy to work on it with you and let's figure out what you should do. She called me a few days later and she said, well, I just left a voicemail message for the athletic director at the largest high school in our area, asking him if I could be cheerleader for a day with the
Mm.
high school squad at 52.
Mm.
She then called me back and said he had returned the call, and they all said, he said, and the squad said, hell yes.
Oh, I love this so much.
So at 52, she trains with the squad. She picked it up immediately because, she has it in her to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And she said to me, the biggest concern that she had at the time is, would she be able to fit into the uniform that they give her?
Oh, yeah.
And the night before the game, they gave her a uniform that fit her perfectly. She had a little bit of a crisis of confidence that morning before the game where she almost turned her back on it, but she moved forward. And when she told me the story, I get goosebumps, and I still do when I think about it. She walked out onto the field, and the loudspeaker said, Johanna, cancer survivor, mother of three, has always wanted to be a cheerleader, and she is fulfilling her Scare Your Soul dream today. And she turned around and faced the crowd and got a standing ovation from
Oh,
2,000 people.
wow. I just got goosebumps from that. Oh my God.
And Michelle, I have to tell you, I think the best part of this story is actually what happens next.
Yes.
She does the routine, performs flawlessly, the crowd goes crazy, all of that is great, and it's wonderful. She went into the stands after halftime because she was the halftime entertainment, and she said there was a line of women who were waiting to walk up to her and just say, thank you.
Oh, I love this so
Thank you for
much.
doing what you did. Now, when we think about the contagious nature of us supporting each other when we do courageous acts, that is a great example. Because I guarantee, well, I can't guarantee you, but it's a pretty good chance that each one of those people who came up and said thank you did something that day.
Yeah.
They went home and they had a tough conversation with a spouse, or they gave someone a hug, or contacted an old friend. They did something brave. And then you start to see these ripples and you start to see the impact of living life this way. And Johanna to this day has as the lock screen on her phone the picture of her with two big, burly football players, high school football players, that begged her to take a photo with them after the game.
I absolutely love the story. I think it's so beautiful. And somebody's going to hear it and they're going to remember something that, whether it's singing, somebody who knows, maybe they have those cheer ambitions themselves. They want to start a speaking career or like see themselves on stage. Because I think, a lot of what we talk about on the show, and it sounds aligned with the work that you do, is you get this, you have an inner knowing of like the parts of you that want to be reclaimed or remembered, or that sense of play that was there that wants like an expression. So, where does somebody start? I know you said small steps, but maybe help walk us, my audience, through this a little bit more. I mean, that took a lot of courage too.
For sure.
A lot
These
of courage.
it took a ton of courage, and I think she felt like she needed it. She wasn't in that, well, my life is comfortable, but it's not exactly what it could be. She was in a bit of a crisis and
Hmm,
needed an
something.
injection. So I think we all come to this work in different ways and at different times. And I do think that when we are in crisis, it does force the issue.
Yes.
We realize, gosh, I am feeling your age, and I'm newly divorced, and maybe not loving what I'm doing professionally. It's not as fulfilling as it could be. And we know we have to amp it up and we have to make some changes. And that leaping into the unknown is so scary. And so in Scare Your Soul, we have all kinds of tools and frameworks and stories of other participants who have done scary things. And of course, all this is individual. What is scary to me may not be scary to you, and vice
So
versa,
true.
right?
I love that you said that. So true. That's so true.
I,
Yes.
I I remember one of our first ambassadors was this unbelievably strong. She was a dancer. Sarah Marie is her name, and tough. And I said to her, she asked also, could she do a Scare Your Soul challenge? And I said, of course, I would love to help. And she came back to me and she had thought about it. And she said, I am going to hold hands with a guy in a mall. That's what I need to do. And I was really taken aback, and I said, "My, of course, that's great, but could you tell me what feels courageous about that for
Right.
you?" And
Yeah.
she said, "I grew up in an abusive home,
Hmm.
and I don't like to hug, I don't like to touch. I'm my own entity, and so to me, holding hands with somebody and walking for 5 minutes in a mall feels as about as courageous as leaping out of an airplane might be for someone who has a fear of heights."
Wow.
And again, this little light bulb went on above my head, and I said, well, this isn't prescribed. I don't have a top 10 list for anybody. What I have is hopefully some inspiration, some stories, and maybe some science that will help you understand how your fear response may be holding you back. But at the end of the day, it is that inner knowing, Michelle, that you mentioned, that
Totally.
guides us down these paths.
Yeah.
And I just believe, life is short, and it is sometimes more precarious than we want to admit. And we only have today and this present moment and the next one that comes after it. And I want people to enter that with as much verve and passion and bravery and vulnerability as possible, because that opens doors to what's beautiful in life. And then
Hmm.
that leads to all the other extrinsic rewards that we think we want, the success and the money and the status and all that stuff that we may sometimes think that we want
Totally.
really are byproducts of living a life where we're aligned with our passions and our goals. And we need to grow, and we can't grow if we're in that lane and just seeking comfort all the time.
Yeah, and it becomes a ripple effect, like you said, because the woman who did the cheering that inspired other women, and you're right, they probably went home and did stuff. People saw you singing. Who knows how many people went out with a guitar and
Yeah.
maybe had that moment. What's a like really easy step, like something very like anyone could do and just play with that doesn't require as much courage, but still is going to scare their soul a little bit?
So I think I've written 500 courage challenges at this point. We put out a free one every single week. And I think probably our most classic one that we just go back to over and over and over again is buying a cup of coffee for the person behind you in line and committing to having a discussion, a talk with them while you're waiting for the coffee. So it's not like one of those drive-by things where you
Yes.
tell
You're on the drive-through and
you
you're
roll
like, I
down your
got the
window
person
and like,
behind me. I've done
you
that.
know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
no, no.
No.
Michelle, I'm guessing that I have probably done this about 100 times.
Wow.
And there is this dose of healthy anxiety because you don't know what's going to happen.
Totally.
But when you couple that with this little beautiful sense of service, like you're doing it for somebody else,
Yeah.
and of course there's the chance that they're going to say no, and you're going to feel this little momentary feeling
Yeah.
of rejection or
Yeah.
whatever comes up for you in the moment. But I have to tell you, I think probably 99 times out of 100, it is a really positive, sweet, and energizing experience for people because it's something they don't do normally. It does require a little bit of bravery. And in the end, you are creating a connection with somebody that may ripple on, first of all, through your day, but also through theirs.
Totally.
And then again, you start to see these ripples. So that's one of my favorites because it's easy, it's actionable, it may cost you $4, but it is so well worth it. I've met people from around the world. I've been invited. Somebody owned a tattoo parlor and she offered to take me immediately back to her tattoo parlor. I happened to turn her down because I was going somewhere else, but these are all little beautiful interactions. And then here's the key. You do it and you come back to work or home and you are feeling great about it. Maybe you start to tell a couple people about it. Maybe they decide to do it. But you have this extra boost of bravery in your soul.
Yes.
That may lead to all of a sudden walking into that boss's office and saying, you know, I think I need to ask you for a raise or more responsibility, or telling the person you've been dating that you really love them and actually saying it as opposed to ruminating and thinking about it for 6 weeks. And then you're on the path. Then you're really starting to commit to a life where you do this more often and tell people about it. And that leads to just, again, all of these beautiful ripples.
It is, and it's connecting us to our humanity and to one another in a positive way. When you witness something where people are
Yes,
being kind, it opens your heart.
it
Um,
does.
Next, this interview is going to come out in February, and it just so happens we're doing a lot of focus on relationships.
Yeah.
And there was a woman who wrote in. I have a woman coming on to talk about dating in midlife and what that's like. And she's like, I'd really like a guy's perspective. This is totally like I'm kind of going somewhere I wasn't planning, but you talked about, maybe you have the guts to tell somebody that
Yeah.
you care about them. Give us, not that you're going to speak for every guy out there, but you talk about in the book how when you were getting divorced too, like friends who are thinking about it sort of approached you, but you might have a lens of what it's like to, from the guy's perspective of being out there and being vulnerable. Because, you know, I have a sense of the lens women feel, but what's it like for the guy?
So I ended up, and I mentioned this in the book, I ended up as a de facto divorcing men coach because I had so many guys seek me out. And I'll tell you why. And again, this has nothing to do with, I think, me or my skills, is I radiate vulnerability. Like I think vulnerability is such a superpower. And I am going to speak very stereotypically here. So
Yeah.
just as
Yeah, we're
putting
generalizing in
putting
many
that
ways.
out there,
Yeah, yeah.
I think men feel a need and a want to be vulnerable, but don't feel comfortable that they have the either the skills for it or the audience for it.
Mm.
Because when guys get together sometimes it's so Joe, how you doing? Great, great, never been better. How's work? Oh, killing it at work, and then you really talk to them when there's a moment of vulnerability and things are not that.
Yeah.
And we're trained to be strong and not show our emotions. And I really have chosen to throw that on its head. And I shared quite a bit following my divorce about what a failure I felt like and
Mm.
how parenting, becoming a single co-parent of two kids who were 5 and 3 at the time, I just felt like such a failure constantly. I mean, I'm trying to do laundry and I'm trying to help them, pack up their backpacks and get ready for school. And I can't even put out more than a microwaved breakfast that I threw in the microwave 30 seconds earlier. It was a constant feeling of feeling unworthy and not meeting my own expectations. So I had two choices, Michelle: keep it to myself, bury it, numb it, whatever, or bring it out, talk about it. And I just chose the latter.
Good for
And
you.
so I shared it in public settings, I shared it with friends, and I think that gave them the confidence,
And
men,
permission.
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 That's the word.
Right?
Thank you.
Yes.
Permission to be able to, first of all, not only do it with me, because believe me, I had I had so many. I'd get this email or a text that said, "Can I just meet you for? I'd love to meet you for coffee." And I'd go, "Oh, they're getting divorced." Like I knew it
Yes.
immediately.
Yes.
And this was then going to become a journey of how do I do it like maybe you did it? How do I do it where I'm able to be my full self, even if I feel wounded and insecure and not masculine? Because it doesn't, all of a sudden now you're not married, you're divorced. Or it took me like 6 months to actually even say that word. I would say, like I'm a single dad. I couldn't even use the D word. It just was so
Mm.
hard. But then I just leaned into vulnerability and I kind of became this go-to for men who felt like they wanted to talk but didn't feel like they could do it. And I can tell you now, many of those men are now, well, many of them are in very loving, successful relationships. That's very important. And the
Yes.
second is many of them are helping others now.
Interesting.
So it can be done and it needs to be done for men. And I think just, we give each other license when we can step forward vulnerably. And it is so much easier, I think, for women. There's just a greater societal acceptance of it, and other women are more embracing of it. And I love that. And I feel this special mandate to help men step into that because it is courage. I mean, vulnerability is courageous. That you bringing up singing and how hard that is there is almost nothing as vulnerable as literally singing in front of a group of people. And I think talking about the wounding around a divorce or a relationship that isn't working or being single and not being in a relationship that you want to be in, oh my gosh, it takes so much guts.
Yeah. And what about getting on those dating apps or something? That was her. She was like, should I do that? And you have to pay 6,000. So I'm asking the woman expert who's coming on about her experience, but she was curious about the guy's perspective.
Listen, I did go on dating apps after I was divorced, and I I felt very strongly about being honest about who I am. And I remember part of this is so many years ago, Michelle, but there's a part of it that
Thank
I
you for going here because like I said, this
I
was
love
not
it.
kind of
I
the focus at all, but I was like, now I have to ask you because you mentioned it and we're going to focus on it this next month. So,
listen when. our lives are relationships. That is the foundation of what makes us happy, high functioning people, is the strength of our relationships. And so this could not be more important. I'm glad that we're talking about it.
Oh, good.
Uh,
Okay.
I remember writing some sort of a line about myself saying that I have just a bold zest for life. I didn't go into, I do this or I'm successful at that. It was more about like, what is my passion? And my passion is for having a bold zest for life.
Mm,
And I think that if men can just be vulnerable about who they really are and what drives them, it may not be what is everyone's cup of tea. It may not get the number one number of clicks in any given app. But what it will engender is people who really respond to that.
mm.
And I'm a fan of dating apps. I don't mind people can meet each other in all kinds of venues. I don't think there's anything that feels not courageous about it. I think it's very courageous to put yourself out in any way. Um, and then you enter the experience. Again, I think I had a coach once who used to say, you have to hit 8 out of 10 on the 3H scale. Let's see if I can remember it. Yes, I
Okay.
can.
Okay.
This is a wonderful coach. Her name is Lori Gerber, who said that
Oh,
you
I
have
know
to
her
hit,
name. Is she really well known?
she is, she's great.
Yeah. Okay.
So Lori has a scale called the three H's: head, heart, and heat. So head, what do they do to your brain, your
Uh-huh.
potential partner?
Yeah, yeah.
Heart, how does it feel emotionally when you're together? And heat, what is the chemistry between the two of you? And I remember her telling me, this is when I was back in my dating days, you have to get the person that you're with after 3 dates, they have to hit an 8 out of 10, or else you have to end, great meeting you. I wish you all the best, which also took a ton of courage because you're saying to somebody, this isn't really working
Yeah.
for me
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
And then I realized, very much like everything I do in the courage world, that it's vulnerability and directness that people appreciate. And that when you
It's
tell
true.
somebody that it's just not working, but they're great and you wish them well, isn't that so much better than stringing the thing along or, God forbid, ghosting them or doing something that really is traumatic to
Hurtful.
their soul?
Yes.
There is so much more grace and generosity in clear, kind, direct clarity that does take some courage on the front end, but is so worth it in the end.
Thanks for going there. I think it's really helpful. Like I said, my show's for women. Women listen to the show. And I think it's important to get both perspectives, and to get that lens on it. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I know in the book you talked about having an amicable split with your wife at the time, and also people were seeing that as a model of like, how you can do it and that you can have two good people that, it's that's just the way it goes. Like it's not going to be forever, and that's okay.
Not only was it okay, it was something again that gave me fuel for the next phase of my life,
Mm,
because I grew dramatically in that moment. I mean, when we split and I became a single co-parent, and I had to redefine my own priorities, which became my children. I'll be brutally honest about that.
of
My
course.
my kids literally became everything. I was kindergarten dad, lunch dad, recess dad. I became vice president of their school. I chaired the dad's camp in where we pitched tents inside the school so that dads could be in the school and have a fun experience with their kids. That was my choice. And I never would have done any of those things if I had just stayed married. It gave me license in a way to rewrite the next chapter of my life just the way I wanted it. And
Yeah.
so, was it traumatic and hard? Hell yes, it was. Not saying that it wasn't. But we have choices in life about how we're going to emerge from that. and I wanted to emerge with my priorities on the things that were the most meaningful to me, and that meant my children.
I just love what you said so much. And it also touches upon what you shared earlier, which is sometimes in a crisis situation where your life as you know it gets disrupted, like your friend who's, did the cheer thing but had been diagnosed with cancer. And also you said she was also a single mom. Life throws you into the deep end sometimes, and it becomes an opportunity to see what you're made out of,
Indeed.
right?
100%.
Yeah.
That really, and then, then we're on the journey, and then it becomes, I talk a lot to our Scare Your Soul community about courage really becoming a practice. So
Yes.
it's not a, one time I'm going to do this and then it's going to change my entire life. Um, I kind of liken it to a yoga practice where the first time you get on your mat, you might feel really out of place. Your body isn't moving in the directions that everybody else is. And you might leave that first time feeling proud of yourself that you went, but a little bit of like a fish out of water. But if you keep it up, you start to get in the zone and you start to see it almost as second nature. And then you realize a little bit later on that you still are a beginner, and it's an evolving practice that never ends. You get deeper into it, and then all of a sudden you're at a yoga retreat somewhere amazing in the world, and you're bringing like it starts to blossom. It's like a flower that starts to blossom. And so to me, a courage practice is very much the same thing, that I counsel people all the time that if we can just try to do one thing every day, tiny, 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 that pushes a comfort zone, smile at a stranger, um, uh, ask for help when you normally wouldn't, tick something off of your procrastination list that's been on for a long time. Um, Buy that cup of coffee for a stranger. Like these don't have to be Johanna becoming a cheerleader experience.
Yes. Yes.
Keep it up, and if possible, have an accountability partner that you could be a spouse, it could be a dear friend, where you can just maybe even send a text at the end of the day saying, I just want to tell you something that I did today. I'm really proud of. I scared my soul this morning by X. And sharing it means you're sealing it in, right? You're creating new neural pathways.
Mm.
You are starting to live your life just like you went from that newbie on a yoga mat to all of a sudden who loves going to yoga. Like it's not always perfect, but boy, do you love going. And that to me is what a courage practice does. And it's what I do every day. And I think this is I can't believe that somebody else hasn't really articulated this. I think it is so powerful and simple, not easy, but simple. And if we do it every single day, it literally opens doors, gates, uh, uh, oceans, and worlds to us that we never even knew existed.
What's next for you on your Scare Your Soul list? I'm curious, do you have anything you can share that you, because this is a muscle you exercise every day. So you're pretty strong now, right? So you got to get out there and do something. I'm just curious if you went and sang, is there some bold goal that you're looking to do?
So to me, there was nothing as scary to me in the past couple of years as writing a book. I know so many people have dreams of writing a book. I never expected to write a book. I actually had a publisher in New York reach out to me after she found my website and ask me if I would like to write a book for their incredible, I think it's the third largest in the world. And I had a decision to make. Was I going to put myself out there? This is like the ultimate, this is to me more vulnerable even than singing in
Yes, I get that.
because it's there. It's in Barnes and Noble or
Yeah.
it's on Amazon or in independent bookstores, for years and years and years to come, if not
Yes.
forever.
Becomes a part
And
of your legacy.
it's a legacy. And so I made that decision. I did follow through with it. I'm so deeply proud of it.
It's a
And
great book.
thank you.
It is. It's a beautiful book. And the whole movement is beautiful, but please finish.
Yeah, so I think now it's about can I find myself in more and new places to share what's in the book?
Mm,
And that is, I still have, Michelle, this is so important for me to say. I still have that shy kid inside of me. Like I really do. And I actually now I love that shy kid
mm.
inside of me. I don't let it stop me from doing what I need to consistently do, but I also honor the fact that it is a struggle for me standing on a stage. And I will always have empathy for people who need to do brave things because I find myself there all the time. And luckily for me, the stages continue to get bigger, which is a
Awesome.
blessing and I love it.
And a reflection of the value you're bringing.
Thank you. I I gauge my success not by the number of people that are there, but the quality of the conversations that happen after I speak, which tends to be people who come up and say, a similar thing happened to me. You have inspired me to tackle it. And to me, that is better than any book sale number or TED Talk or anything of that nature. It is so deeply valuable to me to hear that people are inspired by this message and are taking practical steps to move forward in their lives. It's the best.
I think it's so amazing, and you're clearly on your path. So you can maybe you should have you ever reached out to that teacher if he's still around to say, "Hey, you're the inspiration for my incredible life now." Not in a yeah.
I haven't. I did. There is a relevant teacher story that I think may be meaningful for people. When I was going through these terrible times, I had very few friends. There were certain times in school that I had no friends,
Hmm.
high school being one of them. And there was a teacher who created a study hall in her office for one person, for me, because she saw me in the school cafeteria eating alone.
Hmm.
And so Miss Picard, instead of making a big issue of it or not paying attention at all, said, I'm going to create a new study hall, and you're the only one invited, but I'd love to have you. And I knew immediately what she was doing, and so
That's
I'd bring my
beautiful.
lunch,
Oh, wow.
and I ran into her about a year and a half ago, and I was able to tell her how important that was for me. And at her funeral, which was about 6 months ago, she just
Ah.
passed away. I was able to stand up in front of everybody at her memorial service and share that story.
Oh my God, Scott. I cannot tell you how much I've loved this conversation, everything you've talked about, and just the importance of reclaiming like your sense of worth and belonging and the ripple effect that it creates, and just that beautiful story that you shared. That act of kindness that she showed you when you were, it was high school for in
It
that
was,
situation, high
yeah,
school.
yeah.
So pay dividends like for forever from that moment on. And she may have not even known that. So if somebody takes that, scares their soul and shows their act of courage, it becomes a beacon or a like your word inspiration for someone else to know that it's also possible, and that's how we lift each other up. So I think it's so beautiful, and I love the work that you're doing, and I'm so grateful that you came on. If people want to learn more how to scare their souls, get a part of your movement, get the book, where do I send them?
ScareYourSoul.com has everything. So has signups for our free weekly newsletter with all of our courage challenges, links to the book. The book is on Amazon. It's in every Barnes and Noble. And I encourage people, by the way, that when they do get our emails, I respond to every email that is sent to me. And that's deeply important to me. I make time for it. And so I urge anybody, if they get a newsletter or buy the book, to email me, and I will respond. It's we're all out there for each other, and
Yes.
if we can lift each other up, we are making this world a better place. And I'm deeply, deeply blessed to be in a place where I feel like I can have a very small role in that.
You're doing an amazing job, and I'm grateful for it. I love the concept. You're right. You originated something that seems like it should have been out there, but this is the work that was meant for you. I think we're all given gifts, and if we have the courage to pursue what's calling us and accept that invitation, then it could open up doors we never would have imagined. And you're a clear example of that. So thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for sharing with my audience. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability and what it's like on the guy side for the dating, for the women out there who are going to appreciate that message. I really love sitting with you today, and you're welcome back anytime, Scott.
Michelle, I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.